Good morning, everybody. I think we should probably make a start before we end up being late and overrun. My name is Imran Qureshi. I am the clinical lead for patient safety with the BMJ, and I'm going to be chairing the session on clinical decision support and patient safety. I suppose the reason that I was asked to chair this particular session, I'm guessing what the organisers thought, is before I became a doctor I did a degree in computer science and sort of specialised in programming in Java with particular focus on human and computer interaction. So I have a particular vested interest in IT and how it relates to patient safety and how it can improve care. And I've written very small, humble programs of my own which I use to try to improve patient care, and they have to some extent, and some haven't been so successful, but that I think is the nature of the beast. I think there's many examples that you would have already heard and in previous fora as well about how human factors in particular are sort of in essence, the reason why so much harm occurs in healthcare, and how IT and electronic systems can be used to overcome those problems. So today I'm delighted to welcome Elizabeth Plant and Alfredo Mori to talk about clinical decision support systems and their role in patient safety. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with Elizabeth, and Elizabeth's from the Taranaki District Health Board from New Zealand. And she's going to be speaking about their new e-management medication system and various other legacy systems which have been brought together to try to improve patient care. And we're going to be talking a little more about the lessons that have been learnt and sort of the progress so far and how they've got through that project. And the second speaker, Alfredo Mori, comes from the Alfred Hospital in Australia, and he's going to be discussing the trauma reception resuscitation software system which they've had built and are using, and the positive impact that has had. So without any further ado, I'd like to ask Elizabeth to come and speak. Thanks.
Bonjour, my name is Elizabeth Plant. I'm Director of Medication Management at Taranaki District Health Board. I'd like to introduce a colleague, Dr. John Doran, who's very kindly agreed to be available at question time with me, and apologise for Dr. Campbell White, our clinical champion, who was not able to make the trip. I'd also like to stress that I am not an expert in this field. I am just a beginner, and I'm sure there's many of you in the room here who perhaps are further down the track with computerised physician order entry. But this is a chance for us to share our story. We also, when we submitted this abstract over 12 months ago, perhaps naively thought we'd be further down the track than we are. But we've discovered there's a number of bumps and turnings and barriers on this journey, which I guess is one of the learnings that we can inevitably share with you. So to begin, I come from a small country of 4.5 million people at the bottom of the world. And if we apply the to Era's human findings, we can extrapolate that 50,000 of our patients per year are likely to experience an acute adverse drug event, and 400 may very well die from this, and that there is a preventable annual drug cost of over $400 million to be saved. Looking at where the actual type of error occurs with the study that followed on from the Bates Levy study, we have made progress over the last 15 years with individual pieces of technology, looking at the type of intervention and against the type of where you can put it: prescribing, transcribing, dispensing, administering. But we've now got really serious nationally and at Taranaki about resolving this and looking at it from an end-to-end medication management solution perspective. This is Mount Taranaki, and in New Plymouth we live under the shadow of this beautiful mountain. It's actually an active volcano. It erupts approximately every 350 years, and it's due for eruption any time now. So Iceland, you are not alone. This gives you an idea of a map of Taranaki. This is primarily to highlight the fact that New Plymouth, which is where Taranaki Base Hospital sits, which is the main centre of Taranaki, services a small hospital in Harua, which is an hour's drive away. The mountain sits in the middle of the circle there. New Zealand has a National Health IT Board, and the vision the board has is by 2014, all New Zealanders will have a core set of personal health information available electronically to them and their healthcare providers, regardless of their setting, as they access their health services. And we are making good progress towards this vision. Part of this, and a major part, is seen to be able to achieve the medication safety program. So electronic medicines management is driving a large part of achieving the vision. It's felt if we get medication management right, then a lot of the rest of the electronic health record will follow. So the Medication Safety Program is a partnership between the National Health Board, the IT Board, and the Health Quality and Safety Commission. It aligns to the New Zealand Medicine Strategy and the National IT Plan. And the aims are to reduce harm through medication error, improving quality of care and patient outcomes, improving productivity and reducing waste, and contributing to enabling integrated healthcare. There are a number of initiatives within this program. The Community e-Prescription Service is enabling GPs to electronically send a prescription to a community pharmacy. At the moment, we've only got it happening between 2 software providers, but by the end of the year, we're hoping to have it operating with all software providers, and then with hospital discharge prescriptions and other prescribers. Then there's the hospital ePrescribing, eAdministration, electronic medicines reconciliation, and the hospital e-dispensing, electronic dispensing systems. So they sit within the hospital setting. A major initiative is the New Zealand Universal List of Medicines, and this is a list of all medicines which has the regulatory subsidy and the dictionary that has been aligned to SNOMED CT. So it's defined the medication so that we can have interoperability between the systems. On top of this is going to sit the New Zealand Formulary, which is very much look-alike to the BNF, but it's going to be a New Zealand version. And then we've got My List of Medicines, which I'll elaborate on in a minute. Looking at the hospital sector, we have a Go for Gold campaign, and we've got 4 pilot sites, and Taranaki is one of these pilot sites. So the other 3 sites, there's 2 in Auckland and 1 in Dunedin. Now, the pilots are largely complete, and they were for electronic medicine reconciliation and electronic prescribing. And we're moving into the next phase now with an aim of having all hospitals in New Zealand up to electronic prescribing and administration by 2014. It's an extremely ambitious goal, but it's the aim so that we can meet the IT vision as well. My List of Medicines is aiming to have an accurate and up-to-date list of a person's medication accessible by the patient's healthcare provider, the prescriber, pharmacist, and the patient themselves, which is updated at every contact where medications change. And this would come in 2 forms, a patient version and a healthcare provider version. And I'll elaborate on the healthcare provider version, which looks very much like the Discharge Medication Changes Summary Report, which we currently get off the system that we've got through the electronic medicines reconciliation system that we've got working at the moment. This is what Taranaki District Health Board base hospital looks like, and you can see it nestling under the mountain there. It's a small provincial hospital, 245 beds, but it offers general medical, surgical, and full range of services. We have a pharmacy department operating Monday to Friday, 8 to 5, and limited services Saturday to Sunday. Now that's important in terms of context for the ability for us to resource our electronic medicines reconciliation service, because it's very reliant on our pharmacist resource. And as I said, we've got a small remote hospital an hour's drive away. We serve a population of just over 100,000 people. It's about 3% of the total population. We have a medication management vision for Taranaki, which is that all clinicians and other stakeholders will be able to do everything relating to medication reliably via online electronic tools accessed through either the clinical portal or their local system of choice, and that patients will have appropriate online access and will be using bedside verification within the hospital setting. We're also embarking on redesigning a new hospital, and this is due for moving into in August 2013. We're looking at new models of care, and the electronic medicine management project is seen as key for driving the new models of care. This is a couple of pictures of what the new hospital's planning to look like. So we're taking this project as a complete patient journey, and what we've been doing is working with all the various components. So we've been asking patients to bring their medication in, and we've been putting them in the green bag. I bought a copy of the green bag for you, for those of you who haven't seen a green bag. It's quite large to fit the blister packs. We've been getting from the general practitioner the fax copy of the last prescribed prescription, from the community pharmacy a fax copy of the last dispensed prescription, rest homes a copy of the drug chart, and from the ambulances they pick up the patient, they bring the medication in the green bag. We're hoping once we've got the fully integrated systems working, then that would fire within the hospital system, and the outputs will be the discharge medication changes summary report, which forms part of the discharge medication, the electronic discharge summary, the patient information yellow card, which they take home with them, the discharge prescription, and patient information leaflets, which will all come off the system without transcribing. This is the IT view of the interfaces. And we have three major companies that we're working, software vendors we're working on, which has required quite a lot of interoperability challenges. We're also working on a regional project, which means that we're putting a centralised data repository across the entire central North Island. So once we've done the project in Taranaki, we will be putting it across 5 district health boards. So the medicines reconciliation system is provided by Orion. The electronic prescribing administration and pharmacy dispensing systems are provided by iSoft, and we also have Pyxis automated drug distribution systems. So the interfacing is very complex, and we have phase 1 interfacing and future functionality interfacing that we have planned. This is the idiot's guide to the interfacing. This is the version that I prefer, because I'm not an IT expert. And this shows very clearly the medicine reconciliation phases, which align with the collect, compare and communicate phases. And you can see the outputs that come off the electronic discharge summary there, with the discharge medication changes summary report. This report shows very clearly for the general practitioner, for the patient, for the rest home and for the community pharmacy, what the patient came into the hospital on or into the transition of care on, what was changed and why, what was stopped and why, what was started and why, and what the patient's been discharged on. It's colour-coded and it's part of the discharge summary. We have this up and running now. This is in operation, and this is what it looks like. So the icons are very clear there, and the feedback from general practitioners, community pharmacies, rest homes has been very positive. For those of you who don't know what Pyxis looks like, this is what it looks like. It's a very boring robot. It's an automated drug distribution system. We've had it here in Taranaki since 1999. It enables us to interface the patient management system. We can do prospective decision support prior to the first dose being given. Once we get the fully integrated interoperable system with the electronic prescribing, then we will be able to do auto-resolution and auto-profiling. The benefits of the integrated system for clinicians, interoperability is essential. It will enable lean processing, and I went to the lean sessions yesterday, and I was rather overwhelmed by the challenges that really are ahead of us with the clinical changes, with the enormity of what we've undertaken. No transcribing between systems, reduction in error, obviously that's what we're aiming for. Improved efficiency, we want reduced time for clinicians on data entry. We're wanting to change the model of care, and we're wanting to change the way clinicians are delivering care to the patient. We want them to do it at the bedside, and ultimately we want to give them the tools, the decision support to make it safer for them at the bedside. Now we have to configure the decision support correctly and make sure we've got it right to get this right to actually make the patient safety gains. I know this now. The project phases to date. In November 2010, we put the ePharmacy iSoft dispensing system in, and we've vastly improved the interface integration to Pyxis. June 2011, we put the electronic medicine reconciliation system in, and we worked very hard with the clinical change management. Now, this system was largely designed by pharmacists, and we do have some functionality issues. We are working through clinical change. We've documented a number of enhancements, and this is ongoing. We've worked really hard with our clinicians, and we have got some really good results, but we have some ongoing clinical change that we need to do. In April, right at the moment, we're putting our allergy project in. In New Zealand, we have a unique identifier for all our patients. So we have a national warning system. If we can identify an allergy or an adverse drug event, we can tag it to the individual unique identifier. And at the moment, the problem is it's put in a number of different systems. So we're going to have it in the one system, in the prescribing system, in the MedChart system. And we're going to do a process of verification so everybody can have confidence that that allergy or adverse drug reaction can be taken as meaningful. On June the 6th, we go live and with electronic prescribing in our assessment and rehab ward. We've chosen to do it in a different ward to the ward that we've gone live with electronic medicine reconciliation, because we would have had two conflicting discharge processes if we'd done it in the other ward, because we do not have the interoperability between the systems at this stage due to the challenges the companies have had trying to get the interfaces to work. This is planned now for October, and this has been a major challenge for us. So we are going to implement in wards as standalone ePrescribing, eAdministration, then go back and pick up the integration. We have a challenge ahead of us to do the full hospital to be fully up and running before the new hospital comes into being in August 2013. However, it is good to have a time frame like that to force the issue both with the software vendors and also to have a time frame to work to. Moving on now to look at the electronic medicine reconciliation results. These results are results that we report to the Health Quality and Safety Commission. There's a number of process and impact measures. With the process measures, we have a number of challenges with us because of the difficulties with getting the information from community pharmacy and general practice, and also because we're not starting and we haven't got the electronic medicine reconciliation system in ED yet because of the fact that there's still functionality issues with it. I don't want to put it in there until we've got those fixed. I don't believe it's fair to the busy emergency department. Also, we're having to collect the allergy information manually at the moment, and so we haven't got the reporting automated. With the impact measures, we are making progress. You note the results July to January is when we actually went live, immediately post-implementation. You'll see the top 3 impact measures, we are definitely making progress. and the bottom ones are the relative results between what is allergy and what is medicine discrepancies. What we see as some of the key principles that we've discovered for our success is we've had a clinical change champion on the floor, we've branded our project, we've targeted our training one-on-one, we've done initial training, and then we followed up an audit of 6 interventions with our doctors. So we've looked at 6 interventions of medicine reconciliation, and then looked at specific one-on-one training where there's a variation we feel that they need to focus on. We've identified barriers to them using the system, and we've worked on trying to get enhancements to fix it as soon as possible. We're using a dashboard and reporting the results regularly. We're making it as visible in the ward. We've got it on a poll so that they have to see it. We're making the targets relevant to the clinician group so that we're making the targets something they can actually influence. We thought long and hard about having a positive incentive, and so we came up with the concept of a coffee cup that would keep the coffee hot for the young doctors. We thought that maybe this would inspire their enthusiasm. Taranaki colours for the rugby team. Rugby's a bit of a religion in our country, is yellow and black, so the coffee cup comes in yellow and black colours. We were hoping that maybe if it got left lying around, people would think, what is that? And so therefore, with the branding, it would do a bit of education. We have a regular newsletter with we name our excellent achievers. We do presentations, lots of morning teas. Praise and encouragement, we find, goes a long way. So here's an example of 2 of our dashboards. We change them regularly. We're doing them monthly now. We're giving them results monthly so they're relevant and up to date. And there is our Go for Gold coffee cup. We're trying to make it a prestigious trophy. So these are the specific targets for the doctors. So we've looked at a resolution of medicine discrepancies, documenting the reasons for any changes, finalising the MedRec forms after admission, and doing it as soon as possible so we can meet the target of 24 hours. And we've got some really good results. As you can see, from pre-go live at 54%, we've moved to 85% for resolution of differences. Our intentional discrepancies are now documenting. We've moved from 8% down to 2%. So we're getting to a point now where they're documenting their intentional discrepancies. We want to get that down to 0. We've moved for completion rate from 79% to 90%, so we're very pleased with this. We have work to do with that completing within 24 hours. As I said, we probably won't make a great deal of progress there until we bring it forward into ED. This is the branding for our Go for Gold. We use that whenever we go out. And this is an example of how we present the results in our dashboard so they can see very clearly the progress. So these are the various targets. With the pharmacists, they're slightly different. These are the targets the pharmacist can influence. So pharmacists can be able to motivate the doctors to get involved in initiating the med history forms to get onto the MedRec. To do it within 24 hours. You'll note that the bottom 2 are the same as the doctor targets, because likewise they can influence those targets. Once again, we're making progress, and we are making progress in the initiation within 24 hours there. So we've set ourselves interim targets, and we've moved from 31% to 34%. So we've met 3 out of our 4 targets there as well. Once again, same branding and the same dashboard presentation. Moving on to electronic prescribing now, because we're about to go live, we felt we needed to learn from the lessons from everyone else. So we've looked at the international literature, and we know that it's complex redesign of clinical processes. It's going to change all processes around medication management, and it's going to be challenging for our clinicians. We know workflow analysis is essential, and we already have found out barriers to use of the new technology need to be identified and addressed, both before and after implementation, and this is obviously clear with the lessons from the lean change management, but certainly to ensure the appropriate use of electronic medicine management systems, we've just got to keep on identifying barriers to use. This is more about social change than technological change. An interesting study found that e-prescribing systems can lead to increased mortality if implemented poorly. 2 paediatric hospitals implemented the same system. One well, one poorly. One did it in 6 days. They had different mortality outcomes. End-to-end systems are more successful than ad hoc systems. The 2 hospitals most successful in implementing e-prescribing systems have both designed the systems to fit their own workflows. Many adverse drug events result from poor design rather than human error. Administrative type errors, though completeness documentation, will decrease because of forced compliance. But to decrease clinical errors and patient harm, some degree of decision support is essential, but it should be introduced slowly so clinicians can adjust to changes and avoid alert fatigue. And they must customise the decision support for ownership and adherence. There is limited evidence for electronic prescribing reducing patient harm. Most evidence centres around indirect measures of harm such as medication errors. Because of the complexity of implementation, evaluation methods need to be employed to measure success. So safety outcomes, including errors caused by the system introduction, quality outcomes, communication efficiency, workflow outcomes, financial outcomes, and user outcomes. Really important to look at satisfaction, usability, availability, uptake. We can learn from the Westbrook studies. These have just been recently published, and these are really interesting for us because MedChart is the system that we are putting in, and it was one of the systems that was studied in this. Both systems were associated with statistically significant reduction in total prescribing error rates, a reduction of 55%, but they were mainly the incomplete, illegal and unclear prescriptions and not the clinical prescribing errors, and this was thought to be because both systems had limited decision support. However, both systems did reduce the serious medication errors, a reduction of 44% compared to 17% in the control group. But the rate of system-related errors can be significant. They introduced 35% of error rate, and they were clinical error rate that was introduced. Same system can produce different outcomes in different wards, so don't assume you can go from one ward type to another without considering different variables. And different prescribing systems introduce different types of system error. Clinicians' concern was the associated work practice changes. Qualitative and observational studies may identify the nature of these changes, and the results highlight the need to continually monitor and refine the design of the systems to increase their effectiveness, appropriateness and safety. So the final finding was the complexity of undertaking real-world studies should not be underestimated. Finally, looking at evaluation, the New Zealand Health and Quality Safety Commission is currently finalising the evaluation framework for the ePrescribing administration projects for our Go for Gold campaign. Taranaki has introduced the IHI medication safety trigger tool, and it will be one of the key patient outcome measures used. Evaluation is likely to be based on the recommendations of CITIG. The principles of this are, if the system is not available, you will not get the benefit. If people do not choose to use it, you will not get the benefit. And if it's not efficient, you won't get the benefit. So you need to get the workflow, structure and process right first before measuring the outcome measures. And these measures need to be ones that can be reasonably measured in hospital organisations. CITIG used Delphi method according to practicality of measurement, value and measure, and they were grouped according to structure, process and outcome. They had 18, but they cut it down to 8. They looked at percentage system uptime, which is all about availability. They looked at mean response time, how quickly it responded, the percentage of all orders entered, that's the key measure for computer physician order entry. They looked at the percentage of order sets used, whether you got your clinical component right. They looked at the percentage of alerts that fired. Have you got the sensitivity right? The percentage of alerts that are overridden. Are you introducing errors there? System interface efficiency. If you've got interface problems, you've got to identify them and fix them straight away. Miscellaneous orders. Are you not using decision support? Is decision support needed? Our challenges have been in Australasia. There have been existing electronic prescribing systems, but none have been integrated with medicine reconciliation, dispensing and automated drug distribution. So it's led us to have to do integration with 3 different software vendors, and they've not been able to keep to deadline commitments. The interoperability complexity has slowed project timelines, and this has effectively required us to change the order of our implementation. So we've had to do standalone components and subsequently join it up. Also, the evaluation framework has not been defined in time for us to do baseline data to be collected pre-go live. We've also had different professional domains involved, which adds to the complexity of needing to find a solution meeting the requirements for all groups. Generic prescribing for doctors, dispensing of specific brands for pharmacists, administering of specific doses for nurses, and then bringing all the professional domains together, technically and professionally. We need to integrate it into the clinical portal environment, and then we have the future challenge of linking it into the GP community pharmacy ePrescribing centralised data repositories to enable us to do true end-to-end medication management for Taranaki and ultimately for New Zealand. Obviously, the ultimate challenge is getting the clinical change management right, because it's critical to the success of the project. It's not about the technology, we all know that. It's about the clinical change management. We want it to be faster, safer and easier, and one of the government's catch cries is better, sooner, more convenient. Now, I have a wonderful team, all of who require acknowledgement, but I specifically want to acknowledge Tracy Watson, who is our clinical change champion and who was responsible for most of the references in this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for that very insightful sort of review of what you've been doing in Taranaki, and clearly there's some excellent work going on. I think, again, as we said before, it's the nature of the beast. I mean, it's such a complicated thing that's trying to happen, different software vendors, different systems, and I think that people can be excused if you didn't go quite according to the timelines that you thought you were going to go to, but I think that's a lesson that we're all going to take away from this as well when we try to implement similar things in our clinical systems. I just want to let you know that what we're going to do is we're going to do questions right at the end. I'm going to let Alfredo Mori come up and speak about the trauma and resuscitation system. So, Alfredo.
Thank you, Imran, and congratulations, Elizabeth, on an excellent talk. I'll be struggling to match your erudition and conciseness, I think. There are some tropes to take away from that talk about complexity of introducing decision support systems, and also the change that's important, not the technology itself. I'm just reminding myself at the beginning of this talk, in case I get carried away, that there is a handout in the printing room. They'd like you to present to the printing room and ask for one if you would. And on it are the contact details of the lead investigator of this study, Mark Fitzgerald, who can't be with us today for personal reasons and other professional reasons. So I'm a co-investigator on the Trauma Reception and Resuscitation project. I'm a full-time emergency physician working at the Alfred Hospital, which is Australia's largest and busiest trauma hospital. We see about now 1,200 major adult traumas per year and over 3,000 trauma presentations. So we activate a multidisciplinary trauma team about 10 times a day. That's how it averages out. And what I'd like to do is present to you a project that's in process. This talk was initially asked to be presented at Nice 3 years ago, but a certain volcano got in the way and we couldn't fly all the way out. And then we weren't offered a full lecture last year in Holland, and so I'm very pleased to be here today. But I'll go through what we've done, the randomised control trial that verifies this expert clinical decision support software in the reception and resuscitation of trauma, and where we've gone from there post-publication to developing version 2. I'm just at the end of a sabbatical that's helped install this into a simulated environment, and we're hoping to take this overseas, literally as well as figuratively. So what do we do? What we've done is introduce 4 innovations that we've tested in a randomised control trial. Uniform evidence-based algorithms for trauma reception, real-time data collection and integration of that real-time data into computer-driven algorithms with prompts that are linked to monitoring, and then using those prompts to actually affect the behaviour of a trauma team. And then measuring that with objective predefined video audits. So our errors, our investigations, our procedures and our times for those have been predefined. And here are our findings. In the first 30 minutes of trauma reception and resuscitation in adults in a major adult hospital, real-time computerised decision support reduces errors of omission by up to 20%. It increases protocol compliance. So if you look at the gold standard being ATLS protocols, then we improve compliance, 100% compliance with those from 16% to 21%, so we improve that by 20%, and we increase the cognitive capacity of the individuals in the team. So if we look at the cognitive load in one trauma reception, this is one trauma at one time, we make, as clinicians, a critical decision every 72 seconds in the first 30 minutes. And there are just over, or just under, depending on how you want to read it, 2.5 errors per patient in the first 30 minutes. It's predefined errors. And without real-time decision support, if we look at ATLS compliance, then only 16% of patients are error-free in the first 30 minutes. One of the people on our group was an honours medical student, Sian Roos-Waston, who again can't be here, and she wrote a wonderful honours thesis that unfortunately hasn't come up too well. Some of the findings haven't come up too well on a PowerPoint slide. But this is just a brief summary of different kinds of support systems. Ours is an expert system, which was defined, pushed really hard, I was told, here we go. We used using algorithms that give guidance on management based on a defined sets of data inputs. And the algorithms are based on expert knowledge. So we had, there were 30 of us over a 9-month period trawling the literature and designing evidence-based algorithms. There are other examples that we all use. So, for example, data interpretation. ECG machines will read and interpret data. A monitor will feed back when alarms are set. They're all computerised decision systems. But an expert system is actually based on expert algorithms. So one of the metaphors we could use is a military team in an aircraft, for example. It's loud, it's noisy, we don't have the weapons or the vibration or the supersonic speed, unfortunately, but the results of errors can be quite significant. And we have the precedent set, both in air traffic control and in the military, where expert decision support systems are in place to reduce error rates in pilots. And there's a whole theme of non-technical skills that many of you, I'm sure, will be more expert on than me. The only problem with this metaphor in the military is that teams tend to work together for a long period of time. And what really happens in trauma systems, or in trauma centres or in hospitals, is that we have temporary teams of indigent staff that will come and go. And that's more likely what happens in a civilian aircraft. So we will have, for every trauma, an emergency physician, an anaesthetist, a trauma surgeon based on certain criteria, an emergency registrar, a trauma registrar, and an equivalent number of nurses, so one each for A, B, C, D, airway, breathing, circulation and deficits. Deficits is often the scribe person, and then the trauma leader, and that often falls to the emergency physician like myself. But then who they are may change throughout the day and night. So we were the lead centre. Mark was the lead investigator. He came up with the idea and put in the proposal. Swinburne University is the university that received the grant for the software development, and our collaborating agencies are as listed, really. The important ones, they're all important, I beg your pardon. The ones that become important in the future, the Royal Melbourne, as you'll see at the end, we're hoping to install this to make this a multi-centre trial. The Royal Children's Hospital, also in Melbourne, so the Alfred, the Royal Melbourne and the Royal Children's are the 3 trauma centres, designated trauma centres in the state of Victoria, which is about the size of the country, say Ireland. the Royal Children's have been using a decision support system with video audit, but not an expert system. And then we were lucky to have as a partner Colin McKenzie from the Shock Trauma Centre in Baltimore, and lucky for a few reasons, one of which we are hoping to integrate this into some systems in the US. And he also has done a lot of the work in video auditing procedures as the only objective way of knowing what actually happened. So the evidence base since the early 90s has been a committee-based review of errors in trauma reception and resuscitation. And the Consultative Committee on Road Traffic Fatalities in Victoria met every 2 years since 1992. Frank McDermott is the lead investigator there. And they identified over half and nearly all of preventable deaths occur at reception in the first 30 minutes. And most of those errors relate to trauma resuscitation. Now, they're not difficult errors. This isn't a team who's misdecided or who has wrongly interpreted the ratio of blood products to give. This is a patient who receives a chest tube and hasn't had an X-ray to check where it is, or who's intubated and hasn't had the tube properly checked, or presents bleeding and hasn't had the external wound controlled or a fracture splintered. These are what we would think of as very simple errors in a mature trauma centre. And we know from the evidence that if we teach people a course like ATLS or EMST, that these expert trauma courses that so many of us have been on, that we deteriorate skills and knowledge within a month, and that if we measure protocol compliance prospectively, we lose nearly half of our compliance. So our hypothesis was that we could improve resuscitation and reduce error if we improved team communication, standardised our interventions. Remember, this is occurring in a non-standardised, dynamic, noisy environment. We had real-time physiologic monitoring linked to computer algorithms, so our monitors were scanned 3 times per second by the software, and we offered algorithmic treatment pathways to influence behaviour. Our goals, as we've heard from the last talk, was to minimise human factors, offer real-time decision support and standardised decision-making. We had hoped to reduce mortality, like all of us do, but we'll see soon that wasn't possible because of the numbers and also the time with which we had to produce a product because it was a state-funded project. And then we were hoping to develop an environment where we could actually measure single factors and variations. So till now, we've looked at trauma and critical care trials where we introduce one single variable into a very complex, non-standardised, dynamic environment that's reviewed retrospectively and reviewed differently around the world. It's very difficult to understand what the influence of that single factor might be. It's not until we standardise the environment that we actually have a better chance of actually determining causality. So in the first 30 minutes, we developed uniform algorithms with a temporal hierarchy. If we look at the way critical care algorithms have been formed and have failed in the past, it's because they haven't allowed for time. So if you look at goal-directed therapy algorithms, for example, there's no allowance for time and no change in decisions being made for time. We offered diagnostic and therapeutic real-time data collection and real-time computer-driven algorithms with prompts. These are visual prompts linked to monitoring. So the prompts came out as green, orange and red that we'd recognise, even I think in Paris, as go, be aware and then stop, just like a traffic signals. And then to measure what we were doing properly, we had predefined video audit and a predefined video audit software tool to verify compliance and measure error rates. So it's a randomised controlled trial of 4 innovations. We powered it for a 10% error reduction. We only looked at the first 30 minutes of trauma reception and resuscitation in adults. We only looked at patients who came to our hospital directly. We excluded transfers. Transfers have been worked on elsewhere. They've been pre-communicated. They by nature have a high mortality. We knew there'd be a Hawthorne effect, and slides coming up will show you why. So if I tell this group in the crowd what I'm going to do, I'm going to measure them. A, it will affect their behaviour, and B, it will affect the behaviour of the other people in the room who are hearing and seeing me do that to them. That's the part of what the Hawthorne effect is, to my understanding. And this was a Victoria Trauma Foundation funded project, and projects in the state have failed before because they haven't produced a result. So we're very keen to do so. They gave us $2 million, but we had to have a result within 2 years once we started the trial. So we couldn't power for mortality reduction. We would have needed 10 to 20,000 people to do so, given our baseline mortality was just over 5%. So here's an example of an evidence-based algorithm that Mark developed. If there's a trauma arrest, one of the things you recommend is bilateral lung compression, and then if you follow down the yes/no algorithms to decompress the chest, basically, and insert a chest tube, and then check the chest tube is in. And that's not unusual in critical care algorithm development. But if we take it a step further, what we did was actually put a time limit here. So at 1 minute, for example, if you look at a trauma arrest, these are suspected or confirmed diagnoses, we needed to act. So within a minute we had to act on a low blood pressure and actually have IV access within 5 and decompress the chest and stop bleeding within 5 minutes. And at 15 minutes, for example, we've given fluids, we've reassessed the patient, performed an ultrasound, an X-ray, and a chest X-ray and a pelvis X-ray. So we're time committed as well. This is our trauma centre bays within our emergency department. There are 4 equal bays that look into each other, which is important if you've got multiple patients, because in an idealised world, this all looks at one person, one doctor, one nurse, or one team with one patient at one time, and that's not how it works. There's multiple traumas that arrive. Because we can hear and see each other, that Hawthorne effect becomes very, very important. And so what we did was put in this system in 2 bays, in the red. There's a screen, there we go, there's a screen in 2 bays and a data entry bay under which is a DVD recorder in the computer that actually recorded the first 30 minutes. They were the treatment rooms, and in the other 2 rooms they were the control rooms. And we also placed occult cameras and microphones, which I'll have to highlight. So here's our data entry bay, under which here is a DVD player. A DVD recorder, I should say. And there's our camera and our microphone. Now, in the past, there have been studies that have video audited performance in real time, but they've been big video machines. This is occult. And people knew this was happening, but they couldn't see it. And this is Emma Newton-Brown, one of our nurses. She's entering the data in real time by hand, and the physiologic monitoring is also being scanned automatically 3 times per second. So if you walk into one of our treatment bays, this is what you'd see. What's seen on this screen is the same as this screen. They're reflected. We put in 40-inch plasma screens, I should say. And this is an example. So one of the other things that changed is if you enter into a trauma in the first 30 minutes, the first thing you do is interrupt what's going on by saying, hey, what's going on? What's happened till now? And people wouldn't necessarily know. They'd write it down retrospectively. This is real-time data. So at the top left, and there's a better slide coming up, a clearer slide coming up. Top left is introductory data, so mechanism, age, gender, pre-hospital data, and then once on arrival. The unstable signs are highlighted in pink, the vital signs are highlighted in pink. Green is confirmed diagnoses, question is suspected diagnoses. Remember, as emergency physicians and critical care physicians, we don't know what's happening with a patient, so we have a pre-selected list of lethal diagnoses that we are excluding. It's an exclusive mindset, and this is what's actually happened in real time. And up here are the prompts. So it's asking us to give an infusion of 1,000 mils. It hasn't happened, so it's not green. And what it's still prompting, we haven't answered, is there external bleeding? So that's now, at 5 minutes, that hasn't been answered, so it's now flashing red. That's perhaps a clearer example. And I'll just leave that up there for a second so you can just take in what's there. There's not a lot, but the questions are suspected diagnoses. These are confirmed diagnoses. And you can see, even at a glance, what's actually happened. And then real-time prompts to actually help you change your behaviour. So we walk in and you can actually look up at the screen and be offered some information. Angela's our current manager for the project. Nathan was our past trauma manager. The game changer, however, is this. There's a printout. So we're looking at someone who's unstable, who's only in the trauma bay for 15, 20 minutes, and as we all know, all around the world, the notes are appalling. They're shocking. Because the patient goes to theatre, or they go to angiogram, or they die, or there's another trauma, or it's a multi-casualty event. Whereas here you just push, what would it be? Control P, or just P, and away you go. There's actually a printout. And there's actually room for comments at the end if you wanted to write that down. But that could have a signature, patient could go to theatre. That's the game changer for me, because we see multiple multi-traumas every day. The video audit tool was developed separately, or at the same time, but it's a separate tool. We trained 10 video auditors who are clinicians Each of the videos were recorded, as I mentioned, and they spent about 5,000 hours. So initially about 10 hours for every half hour, and they got it down to 2 hours as they were better trained. And each video was audited by 2 independent video auditors. There were error flags placed within the audit tool. It's a suggestive system, so you don't have to follow what was prompted. And then those errors were flagged as to why people didn't, or sorry, not why, but when they didn't comply or when they did comply. We looked at testing the video audit tool, so we just looked at a sample of just under 5,000 error decision samples with 2 auditors. We expected a 50% agreement, and in fact, I've never seen a kappa much better than that. I'm not a mathematician, but I know that's pretty good because it's near 100, or it's over 95. So excellent concordance between 2 independent auditors. There were ethical issues. We have the greater good ethics in Victoria, so many patients were unable to give consent. They were intubated, or they were sick, or they were drunk, or they had head injuries. Patients and families were informed, and we only had in the whole study 1 father who pulled his son out of the trial. Otherwise, everyone complied. We were testing the system. We were not testing staff. So here, you weren't fed back. A, you couldn't see the staff member anyway, but B, you weren't fed back, oh, you mucked this up, you didn't do that right. There might be some gentle feedback like you left the motorcycle clothes near a place where someone could fall over, or the team weren't gowned properly or didn't have all gloves on. But individual's performance was not actually tested. We had access to an ethicist, and there was an opt-out option which no one took. The videos were only used for the system. For the trial, I beg your pardon, they've been destroyed since. The audit team was discreet, confidentiality was guaranteed, they couldn't be used for any other reason. And the order in which they were presented to the auditors was randomised. So you might remember there were the bushfires in 2007 in Victoria with a horrendous loss of life. We were the receiving hospital. If you were auditing that weekend's work, you would have known they would have all come to from the bushfires, and that may have affected your ability to audit objectively. So they were all randomised. So what did we do? We looked at 300 controls. We powered this, so we knew we had 435 basically each in the groups. We recorded over 2,500, and we had 1,400 that were actually usable. Of those that were unusable, they had to meet trauma criteria. They had to meet major trauma criteria. So if there wasn't a call-out, if the team didn't gather, it wasn't measured. And some didn't measure inclusion criteria because they weren't major traumas. And some, as you can tell with cameras and microphones being so small, and not everyone perhaps speaking as clearly as we like, the AV quality wasn't good enough. So we had to have confirmation of procedures being asked for and being finished verbally as predefined. And we reached our sample size and really had to get on and look at the study. So we actually recorded more than we needed. And here's the results. Basically, this is the historical control group, errors per patient. People knew they were pre-trained, they knew they were being audited in the control group, or they took information from the last trauma, so they were being influenced. That's the Hawthorne effect, so you can see a significant effect there. But once we actually looked at the system's influence on the team, a further reduction in errors occurred even then, and our error-free resuscitation increased from 16 to 21% of traumas. Some examples of actually improving patient outcomes. You'd expect that in a major trauma, this is a mature trauma centre, it's been there since 1987. In a mature large trauma centre, we'd have 100% compliance with some things like placing oxygen on a sick patient, but in fact that's not true. If we look at the baseline control group, it happened less than 90% of the time and did actually improve to 93%. If someone's bleeding externally, again, very simple things. You don't need a lot of training to understand this. If someone's bleeding from an open wound, putting pressure on that wound to stop the bleeding, that's what most people die from in trauma, is bleeding to death. Again, that only occurred 92% of the time in a mature adult trauma centre, and improved to 100% compliance with expert computer decision support. And then there were some surprises. Now, we must be careful with this result in particular because it's a post hoc analysis. We didn't plan for this, but we were surprised at the magnitude. So if we look at red blood cell transfusion, we reduced, expert computer decision support reduced red blood cell transfusion by nearly, 20-30%. And we're not exactly sure why, but we think what it is that if people aren't given direction on what to do as a team, they'll fiddle. They'll do something else. They'll try something like blood, for example. So this is, in fact, an excellent behaviour control tool, if you like, the expert computer decision support system that we trialled. So again, in summary, as we began, in the first 30 minutes of trauma reception and resuscitation, real-time decision support reduces errors of omission by over 20%, improves protocol compliance, and increases cognitive capacity. We published in February last year. Mark's first author. I'm all the way down here. Depending on how you read this, I'm either 16th or 8th author, up or down or across. Dion Stubbs, a cardiologist, he's on board and he's beginning or in the middle of a PhD looking at applying this system to an angiography suite. So computerised decision support. I'm not sure what happens in angiography, but obviously errors can be made. This was published in Annals of Surgery, and it was the lead article in the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality last year, the lead influential article for a time. And the interesting, this is really the summary, if you like, the interesting summary editorial is what we've basically offered is a stable member of this fluent team, and that stable member is the computer. It's the only one stable, reliable member. There have been, I'm not going to go through all this because I know I'll lose my audience, but there have been systematic reviews of computer decision support systems. They are favourable in improving clinical practice. Again, this is from Sian's work. This is the latest review. Obviously, it improves as time goes by, but that's a summary of all of them. And an expert system, what makes our system different, or what makes an expert system different as an example is standard systems, a real-time system, if you introduce time. So a standard system will give you the same instruction at whatever point in time. So the patient's blood pressure is 90, we've stopped bleeding, we've decompressed the chest, it will ask you to give 1,000 mils of saline. Whereas an hour down the track, once you've done that, a real-time system will say, well, that hasn't worked. Let's try something else, like let's give blood, or let's take the patient to theatre, or let's put a splint on their pelvis, for example, or recheck the chest tubes. So an expert system will change, a real-time system will change its instructions dependent on time. And this, I know it's hazy, this just shows us where we are in history. Here's our TRNR system. This is, I can't read it myself. This is ATLS. And this is computer historical developments. I'm sorry about this, it's PowerPoint. But there's only one other system as of 2010, which is the CXT, 3CXT, which I think is trialled in Texas, which is an intensive care unit system. That's not real time. So we now have the TRNR as standard of care in all 4 trauma bays. We've extended our system to the secondary survey. So the primary survey is that first 20, 30 minutes of excluding and treating life threats. We've now extended the system to 120 minutes. A lot of our patients go to CAT scan, and that's a point at which decisions are made and changed. They come back from CAT scan, and we can enter that data into the system and change it. We've linked the TRNR to the TraumaNet, so that printout that you've seen now is printed electronically as a PDF and enters the patient's electronic medical record when they're on the trauma unit. We've added ICD-10 diagnoses. VACIS, VACIS, is the Victorian Ambulance computer information system. So they enter, at the scene, they enter data on a laptop, which we now can link wirelessly. They enter, give a handover, but push a button and link that data wirelessly onto the TRNR system. So it's not entered manually. And we're trialling the latest software in 2012. The truth is it's a bit clunky. And once you get used to it, it's sort of a bit patronising to be asking the same questions over and over again. And so we're trying to make it more user-friendly based on staff feedback and some trialling we're doing in a simulated environment. And obviously, if you think about it, if there's a staff member entering data manually, that staff member could be doing something else. And there's a potential for data error entry. So we're looking at speech recognition entry via zygomatic microphones offered us by, we hope, the US military. They're actually using them in tanks, which if you can imagine shouting and ordering might be a bit difficult. So that would free up the trauma leader, and it's basically binary yes-no answers to algorithms as brought up by the software. Oops, wrong button. My hospital clinical is right on the end. And now, my camera wasn't that great, or I was risking my life taking a photo in the middle of the road. So these are our 3 research centres on the same block. And up here is the Australian Centre for Health Innovation, where I spent a lot of my sabbatical, along with the National Trauma Research Institute. I haven't got up-to-date photos, I'm afraid, but you can imagine that plasma screen up here. This is the sim centre, and there's a sim room, standard all around the world, I'm sure. But we've made the trauma bay into a simulated environment, and we can now trial this software. It's just too busy in the trauma centre to trial software once it's been in. So to figure out all the, to make it user-friendly and to retrain staff, we actually need a simulated environment. To actually market this, if we were to place this in other trauma centres, which is what we're planning to do, and train staff across the world, it should be best done via the web in a simulated environment, which we're hoping to do as well. And that's why it's in there. So we train staff, we're trialling various scenarios. We will reintroduce the TR&R upgrade later this year back into the trauma centre. And part of the reason I'm here is to market and promote the whole thing. We've had contracts, thanks to our partner in the University of Maryland. Contracts were reasonably easily sought and obtained via military and civilian wireless software companies. So Athena markets to the US military. They have some quite incredible software and are keen to employ this software in a handheld or portable or wrist or forearm-based method on the field, with feedback from there's wireless inputs from soldiers. We're hoping to install this. Mark is travelling to Baltimore in May. The R. Adams Cowley Shock Trauma Centre, if you like, is our biological parent. It's the trauma centre on which the Alfred's based in design, and it's a very similar looking helipad. And Colin works there, so we're hoping to install it there, and our sister hospital, the Royal Melbourne, down the road. So we now have Australia's largest and second largest trauma hospitals that will be using this software. And as we know from critical care, as we know from anything in medicine, if you have a baseline mortality of 5 or 6%, trialling something that will actually improve mortality requires 10 or 20,000 people. So we need to multi-centre this, otherwise we'll get very old at the one centre. And that's a copy of our webpage. We're on the web, and that's a final reminder to me to remind you of a handout if you like. I'm very happy to take questions. Thank you for your time. If there's anything I can't answer, then please feel free to contact Mark, who's the lead investigator of the whole project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alfredo, for a fascinating talk. I think that many members of the audience will share my delight that you weren't actually able to speak at Nice and able to speak here. Now, I think that we've got roughly 20 minutes for questions, and I'm just going to open the floor really. So, yes, that gentleman over there.
Elizabeth, thank you for your talk.
Sorry, could I just ask, could you just state your name and where you're from? Yeah.
iSoft. It was the original Hatrix product.
And with your iSoft pharmacy product, I assume that's iPharmacy?
No, it's ePharmacy. ePharmacy is available in New Zealand. They're not bringing iPharmacy across from Australia.
So that may make the second question a bit irrelevant. So, because iPharmacy doesn't receive HL7 messages from other prescribing systems, does ePharmacy?
Yes, it does. So ePharmacy is the new generation version, and my understanding is they're going to get it in an Australasian version and then take it across to Australia.
And the last question is, pharmacists are very dedicated to their inventory management systems, and prescribing seems to come a second role, if you like, for a whole integrated medicine management system. I was wondering how you interacted with the pharmacists versus the doctors around that.
For 15 years, I was Chief Pharmacist at Taranaki District Health Board, and in our organisation and most of our pharmacy departments across the country, clinical pharmacy is seen as our prime role now. I think the supply function role has got to be seen as fundamental and really important, but automation and more efficient ways of doing that is certainly there. We've got different systems like the ROA systems that are introducing now even more technology that makes that distribution very much more automated. I know in the UK they're using those sort of systems that will improve the efficiency of distribution. Pyxis has certainly made the change to Taranaki. If we hadn't made that change 12 years ago, I don't think we'd be in the position we are now.
Next question. Yes, sir.
You seem to be taking it from the perspective of how do we do effective medicines reconciliation being a major driver.
Yes, I felt that we needed to get the concept and culture of electronic medicines reconciliation embedded and needed our prescribers, our doctors, to understand that. Before we introduced electronic prescribing, because if we bought electronic prescribing, it was going to be very, very much more difficult to then get electronic medicines reconciliation embedded. It's been certainly reinforced that now the clinicians have that understanding. It hasn't been helped by the functional difficulties we've got with the system at the moment. But the fact that we've got to give them intensive training has also meant that they've been forced to see the various complexities around the transition in and out, because there are a lot of complexities. It's the nature of the beast. Unfortunately, pharmacists are very detailed orientated, and doctors, are very focused on prescribing and less focused on the, as we said before, the inventory supply and what happens after the event. And that's what I was saying about the domains. So we've got the challenge of the doctor wants to prescribe safely and appropriately and move on, and they don't see necessarily the full picture of what happens where the pharmacist has made it their science to do that.
The lady in the middle, yes.
There's two methods of data entry. The monitor will screen. The monitor is screened 3 times every second for changes in vital signs. If there's a change in vital sign that the monitor doesn't pick up, then it's entered manually. And there's a very complex touch screen pull-down list of menus of diagnoses and interventions that are then entered basically by touching. That's the nurse entering that data. The time is actually automated, so she doesn't have to enter, or he doesn't have to enter the time. And then there's an option for free text as well.
These gentlemen are standing here, and thank you for taking the initiative to stand by the mics. If other people, you're welcome to stand by the mics as well. Yeah.
I'm Nigel Miller from New Zealand. I want to ask a question of Alfredo about training. We have a terrible habit in health of training being done by experience, a bit like training pilots to fly planes by crashing them. And I wondered what impact this will have on the training in your organisation, because when you train people in this environment, how will they cope when they go elsewhere without the support that you provide, which inevitably is giving better care?
Thank you, Michael. That's an excellent question. Just if I could reflect back the metaphor about pilots, the other thing about errors is that mercifully they're quite rare. And one of the reasons they're in both environments, and the reason that they're rare, is that we approach these conundrums as teams. And what we found, I haven't got the data, I'm afraid, what we found was that this software had the greatest influence on patients that actually weren't sick. So if we knew about a patient, let's say for example who has a massive head and a massive chest injury and a blood pressure of 80, we'd have a team of people down there already. Pre-gathered. So you'd probably have a surgeon and an anaesthetist, 1 or 2 of us. We can gather, most hospitals now, emergency departments have changed their staffing so that they're basically mini hospitals in themselves. But what that means is that we have a redundancy, a cognitive redundancy whereby people chat. and talk amongst themselves and actually make decisions that are probably independent of the software anyway, although it's suggestive. So what we found was that the error rate reduction really occurred, it was the registrar who saw the patient with the fractured femur, or, at 2 in the morning. And they said, oh, we'll just go and, it's a simple trauma, go and in fact, they were the ones missing the scalp laceration or the fact that the patient may have had a broken jaw. So the answer to your question is, we think the influence will be great. For the main reason being that we've integrated our trauma system. I don't know if this has happened elsewhere in the world, but all major trauma comes to the Alfred, the Melbourne or the Royal Children's. And that means that the expertise in our peripheral hospitals, as you're suggesting, is lost over time. And so we believe that this software will have a great influence once it's been trialled to a point where it's actually practical and intuitive, which it isn't at the moment. It requires a bit too much training. But once it's intuitive and easy, we think it'll have its greatest influence in the non-trauma hospitals, our country hospitals surrounding the Melbourne area. I don't think that staff, I haven't heard the feedback actually, to be completely honest, but I don't know that staff will miss the software in as much as they'll miss the experience of working in a team that has the software support, that is, that has this stable team member being the computer.
Lots of hands. Can I take that gentleman at the back first, whose hand was up a while ago?
Thank you, Peter. What has surprised me always, it's a great privilege to work at the Alfred and work in trauma, yeah? But what has surprised me always, if you think about it, major trauma has a mortality of 5 to 6% baseline. And maybe at our trauma centre, including our transfers, it's under 10%, it's about 8%. And worldwide, where there are major trauma centres, trauma mortality is about 12%. Now let's compare that to sepsis. Sepsis has a baseline mortality around the world, if you're lucky, of about 35%. And it astounds me why we don't have sepsis teams. I beg your pardon, why we don't have sepsis teams. And hopefully there are people in the audience that are thinking about that. So Dion has been looking at this as an individual project in another closed environment, such as he's used the coronary angiography suite. But I personally believe what this project tells us is a few things. One is the only way to really know what you've actually done is to video it. And that's the truth. You have to video it. So why don't we just video our non-trauma resuscitations, our medical resuscitations like heart failure, infarcts, sepsis and overdose. But I think the real challenge, with all due respect to the investigators, and I'm one of them in this, trauma's pretty simple. I think the real challenge is in difficult medical conundrums such as sepsis, overdoses, DKA. I'm not sure. I think if there's a handheld development, that it may well assist things like handover, ward rounds. There are procedures that are performed on the wards. I'm told repeatedly by my ward colleagues that there are sick patients within the hospital and not just in the emergency department. And I appreciate that. So I guess the summative answer to your question, Peter, thank you very much for it, is wherever there is an itinerant group of staff dealing with sick patients, this sort of concept will have a role because we offer a stable member that's evidence-based, real-time data that's dependent on what actually happens. You're making decisions, provided it's a real-time decision support system, and where the consequences for error are relatively or objectively grave.
Thank you. Can I come to this gentleman, then I'll come to the other side of the room.
Okay, thank you. I'm Casper Bollem from Holland. I work on the Utrecht Medical Center. And I would like to thank the speakers for those excellent talks. They touch subjects that really interest me as a pediatrician. I work in a pediatric intensive care unit. And I have a question for each of the speakers. For the first speaker, my question is, and it's a problem I face working in a complex medical environment in which I have to prescribe medications to children ranging from 2.5 kilos to sometimes nowadays even 100 kilos. There is a lot of complexity involved in prescribing these medications. And do you have ideas how to solve getting the complexity away from the prescribers? Because as you already mentioned and told us that this prescribing system tends to be very complex. And I would like to have and use systems that are making my life and prescribing less complex.
I'll lead off if you like. MedChart has 3 ways of prescribing. So it has a freeform prescribing, so prescribes as they normally would. It has a quick list prescribing, so you as a paediatrician can come up with a list of your regular quick prescriptions that you would normally use, so your doses and the frequency that you would normally prescribe. And then it has protocol prescribing, which is where I would say you would probably want to go, specifically in the paediatric area, where you can set specific protocols and you can tie it in with patient demographics, weight, creatinine clearance. There is a degree of, with the decision support, it was not available with the Westbrook studies, but the complexity is there. It's just a matter of configuring it, and it is site configurable. So I think it's a matter of working specifically with the clinicians and then enhancing the solution to make sure that we standardise as much as possible, certainly for a small hospital like ours. John, would you like to comment on this?
I think that the answer really is in the decision support tools that we use and being able to customise them for your particular areas. And I'm a paediatrician as well, and I'm very interested in the ability to customise on growth parameters, which will be, because we're now dealing with huge children sometimes, we need to
I can make a quick comment on your answer. Thank you for answering this. I have to admit I'm working on, I'm doing a bit of program myself, and I think what a good solution would be is if a prescription, like the patient had to get a certain amount of substance, is being translated to something you can really give to the patient. Because I'm not interested in the sizes of the tablets I want to give. I'm interested in the amount of substance I want to give. And I think there should be a translation system involved in that. And if I may,
is it all right if we go? I think there's people who've been waiting a long time. Is that
okay.
all right? Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Yes, over there.
Have a place to capture that decision. And my question is, are your doctors capturing that decision, or are the pharmacists having to go and work it out and put it in the record?
No, we are having soft and hard limits, and we are having, where we've got a soft limit, a reason for overriding the limit. But we also are going slow with our decision support to begin with, so that we're not overloading them at the start. So, we're trying to take it slowly. We're also learning from the implementation in Otago. They went live in August last year, and they've got a combination of soft and hard limits and reasons for override, and so we're building on what they've done and then extending it further. So it will be very much a transition, and I don't expect that we'll get it right for a process of probably 2 or 3 years.
Can we take one final question from the audience? Yes, sorry.
Hi, Doug Woodhouse. I'm a physician. I work as a hospitalist in Canada. And this is also a question about the e-prescribing. I just wonder if it integrates, or if you thought about how it integrates a full order set into the prescribing system, or do you see this as now kind of diverging from like a handwritten order with all the orders, not just medications, to something separate for medication orders and from then the care plan, or how you might integrate those together in the future?
Everything, this is a separate system for medication orders, but the clinician will go through the clinical portal. So from their perspective, they're going through the clinical portal to have access to their orders. So they'll select MedChart for prescribing. They've got their laboratory system for their laboratory orders, radiology. We have laboratory and radiology ordering already up across most hospitals. So they're used to ordering off separate systems already. The key we see is them having the one view to get into all the ordering. Does that answer your question?
It does. As a follow-up question, you mentioned that you thought it might take less clinical time when you move to the e-prescribing system. Can you describe?
Well, we are hoping it will take less clinical time when we've got the fully interoperable system. We know that when we move originally to e-prescribing, it's going to take more time. We know that. We know that from our experience with the electronic MedRec. It takes a lot more time to begin with. But we're also speeding up as we get used to it. We also found with the Pyxis implementation over 11 years ago that you do go through a period of pain, but then you do get through and improve relationships eventually. There's a process of discovering and interdisciplinary discovery between various disciplines. It's very good for relationships between nursing, pharmacy and medicine, these sort of projects.
I think we should probably end the session now. The speakers, I imagine, will probably be available afterwards for questions. Would you all join me in thanking these two presenters? Thank you very much for this presentation.